12 minutes past 11, and a very good morning to you. Now, I know the ears of the Ahmadiyya community are on us right now because they have been tweeting and Facebooking since it was announced that we were going to be talking to three members from the Ahmadiyya Muslim community here on the BBC Asian Network this morning, because you may or may not be aware that what is thought to be one of Britain's biggest and oldest Islamic conventions will be taking place in the UK this coming weekend. It's called the Jalsa Salana, and it is taking place in Hampshire. Now, the organisers, who are of course members of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, are expecting more than 30,000 people from around the world to attend in an effort to promote peace, unity, and highlight what they say are the true teachings of Islam. But who are the Ahmadis? Why do so many Muslims consider them to be outside the fold of Islam? Why are they the victims of persecution? I have spoke to Ahmadiyya Muslim before, whose brother was killed on his wedding day in Pakistan, and he was shot at, and I remember him showing me the scar of where the bullet had passed through his mouth. And you do have to think to yourself, how can people who preach love for all and hatred for none be the victims of such hatred? It is a dilemma. It is also quite inscrutable. But of course, you have to look at why is it that the Ahmadiyya community does, unfortunately, inspire such negative opinions from some. Not all, of course, it has to be said. But as well as talking about that, we are definitely here to talk about the Jalsa Salana and, of course, the scale of it. And I'm joined by Mansoor Clarke, an imam who's documenting the history of the Ahmadiyya community in the UK. Also, I'm with Abdul, Quddus, Arif, and the Dr. Tahir, Nasser, who focus on youth issues. Welcome to the show.
Morning, Nahal. Thank you.
Really good to have you all here.
Thank you so much for having us.
Now, let's first have Jalsa Salana explained to us. And I think, Mansoor, you can be the person to do that.
So the Jalsa Salana literally translates as the annual convention.
Okay, well that's fairly straightforward. I was thinking it was something more poetic than that, but yeah, okay, all right, it's an annual convention.
So this was started by the founder of the Ahmadiyya community, and it was started in Qadian, which is the place where he was born.
Which is...
That's in India. It's
right.
in the Punjab.
Right.
That then moved over after the split of India and Pakistan into a place called Rabwa,
right,
which is again in Pakistan.
Right.
That then when the community moved into various different countries all around the world, most of them have their own annual conventions. So here in the UK, in fact, it's a very good date which the community shares with England. 1966 was the first annual convention which happened here in the United Kingdom.
Right, you're not claiming credit for that, surely, for the World Cup win. I mean, come on, that's stretching credibility, I'm thinking. Okay, so tell me, when you say that the community moved, did they move through just natural migration, or did they move through persecution?
In terms of moving to the other countries around the world, I mean, that spread happened, of course, naturally. I mean, the more people that turn up, the more people that become Ahmadiyya Muslim, then obviously around the world, the population of Ahmadis increased. But yes, you're quite right. There was a migration which was in one way forced and in one way chosen because of extreme persecution that happened in the subcontinent, Pakistan to be precise. Because of that, then the head of the community at the time migrated to London. So yes, you're quite right with that.
Okay. Tell me, what was it like to hear growing up as a Ahmadi Muslim in terms of the relationships with other Muslims? Yeah, sorry.
I don't really, in terms of the relationship with other Muslims, I mean, for a long time, before university at least, I can only speak for myself,
of course, is
that I had normal relations with other Muslims and never really came up. It came up a lot more at university, actually. I think because university is a place that foments interest and discussion on religious topics especially. I was the president of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Students Association and became the national president of all of them for 2 years. And so I was very much involved in discussions and dialogues and attempting to dialogue with non-Ahmadiyya Muslims. Unfortunately, at university at least, my experience so far has been coloured by a lot of negativity, even in the UK. And over
aggressive negativity, or
there were instances of hate leaflets being distributed at my university events by prominent members of what was then the Islamic Society. In fact, one of the previous presidents of their society distributed such hate leaflets. And so there were some such negative events.
Was that reported to the university?
Certainly, and it wasn't taken further, unfortunately. In terms of the...
Is that because of a fear, political correctness, not understanding the issues?
I think it was a desire to I think it was more about the reputation of the university, personally. But
right.
It was, nevertheless, it was something I tried to take forward, and I approached the Muslim communities, both the Shia societies and the Sunni societies, very actively over 3 years. And I said, even if you don't want to have dialogue on issues of difference, we should at least have dialogue on issues of commonality. We should have events on the unity of God. We should have events on love for the Prophet Muhammad. And each time
how dare you take such a pragmatic approach to the Eastern and common sense approach?
Exactly.
Your common sense is misplaced here, quite frankly.
And the answer I always got was the same. It was that we don't want to give you a platform. And it was really painful because I still see them as my brothers in Islam and sisters in Islam, and I still see that we have more in common than we have as difference, and yet they would hold events with the Christian society, the atheist society, the Hindu society, the Sikh society, but the one society they definitely wouldn't hold events with was the Ahmadiyya Muslim Society.
And somewhat sadly, it pretty much seems to be one of the few things that unites Sunnis and Shias.
Absolutely, I think this is one of the most common factors. Like, this is one thing that all the major, sects in Islam have come together in, is denouncing Ahmadis as Muslims, unfortunately. That's what we've seen, especially in the subcontinent.
And is there even, we've just heard Tahir say that there isn't really an open-minded wish to have a dialogue with your community. Do you find that is changing, or do you think that attitudes are becoming even more hardened towards your community, Abdul?
Well, it's not a hard and fast rule. I mean, I think this can be applied to especially those that call themselves, the imams and stuff. They don't want to openly express any sort of dialogue with the community itself. But I think when we're growing up here, especially, the normal Muslims, normal young, guys like us, they were openly frank with us. And, when I was growing up especially, we never had this conversation what differences we have between each other. And we used to pray together, fast together, etc. So it was never an issue as such. But I think when you grow up and, like the imams and stuff, I think they're not as open as the younger generation.
And it is a very difficult situation for Ahmadis in Pakistan, isn't it? It's a very difficult situation for religious minorities, full stop, in Pakistan.
Absolutely.
But the Ahmadi community have been singled out, have they, Mansoor?
I think there's, yes, the Ahmadi community has been singled out in terms of legislation being passed against specifically the Ahmadiyya community. But I think the problem isn't just about the Ahmadiyya community. The problem is about a general perspective and a general mindset, where there's an intolerance and almost a hatred towards anything that's not what you are, almost.
Yes.
So we have the burning of Christian houses, which actually pains
the blowing up of Shia mosques.
Exactly. There we go. The point is that as Ahmadis, we try to teach love for all, hatred for none. And that's not just for our community, that's for absolutely everyone. So if someone was to come in here and say something to you, especially on the pretense of a religious belief, then we would stand up in your defense as we would stand up if someone was to say to Tahir or to Quddus here. So I think, yes, the Ahmadi community has been singled out, and unfortunately it's being singled out around the world. And I think the main reason for that, in fact, is the fact that we try to teach love and peace, and unfortunately, some people around the world, don't appreciate that and don't like that. Therefore, by putting up opposition against us, by inciting hatred towards us, or they try to, unsuccessfully, mask not the propaganda, but the campaign that we're having to try and spread love, peace, and intercommunal integrity in the world.
How many Ahmadiyya Muslims are there in the world?
Unfortunately, because the fact is that many people in Africa, for example, convert. We have huge tribes that convert within a day. The problem is, therefore, that it's impossible to count how many of these people are. So usually the figure that we say tens of millions. We have, I believe it's 30,000 in the UK, and that's a very small amount compared to the rest of the world. We have many more in the subcontinent. In fact, even where the opposition is occurring, it's turned out that we have many more people becoming Ahmadi where the opposition is taking place. So we don't have an exact figure, because every day people become Ahmadi, every day people are joining the fold of Islam and Ahmadiyyat. Therefore, we don't have an exact figure, but it's safe to say tens of millions.
And what is the community's attitude to marrying out, in the sense of marrying Sunni or Shia?
The attitude is there. I mean, there's nothing wrong with marrying outside the community. I mean, that's something what Islam says. That Islam says that you can marry anyone from the people of the book. So, that's not an issue. So,
but from the other perspective, from the perspective of Sunni and Shia families, is there an issue with marrying into them?
Naturally. I mean, it's a catch-22 for us, because once they say that, you don't marry outside the community, then they say that we don't want to give you our daughters or sons. So in both ways, there's no winning opportunity for us.
So there would be no requirement on a Sunni or a Shia to accept all the tenets of your sect in order to marry?
It's marriage itself. It's for the
nikah is the same.
The nikah is the same. The wording exactly is the same. It's again what the Holy Prophet of Islam, his sunnah, his practice. The nikah is exactly the same. There's no difference whatsoever between our nikah and other nikahs of other sects of Islam.
Because I'm sorry to go over this again, but it is important for our listeners who don't understand the differences. So the main issue that Sunnis and Shias have is that, as far as they are concerned, the last prophet is the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Now, then, of course, the idea is that there was a prophet that came after the Prophet Muhammad, and that's what you believe. And that is considered blasphemy to mainstream Islam.
It's very interesting, in fact.
Is that a summary?
It's factually correct, but also factually incorrect. So what the point is that...
Well, that's confusing.
That doesn't confuse us.
Right, yeah.
So the actual matter is that both Muslims, Ahmadi and non-Ahmadi, and in fact the other religions in the world, all prophesize of the coming of an individual in the latter days. I mean, non-Ahmadi Muslims also believe in the coming of a promised Messiah, who, according to the words of the founder of Islam, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of God be upon him, would also be a prophet. So in fact, they also believe in the coming of another individual. This is a common issue.
So the disagreement is over when and who.
When and who, exactly.
Right, okay.
Exactly.
And you, of course, believe that this has already happened.
Yes.
So your community, and they don't.
Now it's simple, I think. I think we've accepted someone known as Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad as the promised Messiah, whereas the rest of the Muslim Ummah is still waiting for that promised Messiah to come.
So give me a little sense of who your prophet was and what he did, so we can give our listeners a sense of why you regard him as your prophet.
I mean, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, stated that the Muslim community would become and turn into the same condition of the Jewish people at the time of Jesus. And so he prophesied that there would also come a figure who would be messianic, who would be, he called Jesus. We believe that that is a title of spiritual similarity and of spiritual function, that just as the malady, which would be extremism, interpreting your religion in an extremely hardline fashion. So when Jesus came, it was an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and he said when you're slapped on one cheek, you turn the other, to offer that as well. When your person walks with you a mile, you walk with him too. If he asks for your shirt, you give him your coat. So it was his teaching to soften the people who had become extremist in their attitude towards religion. And similarly, just today we have ISIS, who have established an Islamic state at the time of Jesus. We had the Zealots, who wanted to establish the Jewish state, and they sought to overthrow the Roman Empire to form the Jewish state, known as the Bar Kokhba revolutionists. It's a historical fact. So we understand Mirza Ghulam Ahmad to be that messianic figure. In terms of his life, he was born in 1835, he died in 1908, and in 1889 he said that God had appointed him. So it's very different, and this is actually the secret to the opposition to the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. He said, God has appointed me to be that messianic figure. God has revealed to me that Jesus Christ, who people believe ascended to heaven and will return in the latter days, was a human being, and he was born like human beings, and he died like human beings. And in a book called Jesus in India, he showed that Jesus actually migrated away from his place of persecution in search of the lost tribes of Israel and died, and his tomb can be found in Kashmir, which can still be visited today in Srinagar. So this mounted a huge amount of opposition, because you see, when a person claims appointment from God, that immediately ends the monopoly that the clergy have on the religious matters, because all of a sudden this person is saying that authority from which you clergy derive your role is actually, you're misappropriating it, you're not leading the masses in the correct direction, and God has appointed me over you, that you should follow me, and I will lead you to God. And so that is actually, you ask, why is there so much specific hatred against Ahmadiyya Islam in Pakistan and other countries? That's actually the answer, really, is that it's because he claimed to be appointed from God, and people who are appointed from God are claiming the highest authority.
Well, in much the same way as Jesus himself was persecuted at the time, and the Prophet Muhammad was...
and all the prophets of God.
It's 27 minutes past 11. 81869 is the text number. You can also email nihal@bbc.co.uk. I'd be very interested to know your thoughts. The Jalsa Salana, which is a convention taking place this weekend for the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. 30,000 people will be coming to the UK to help celebrate, to promote peace and unity, and highlight the teachings. Now, interestingly, Mansoor, I can imagine that there will be non-Ahmadiyyas coming to find out about your faith.
Yes, not only just coming to find out about the faith, in fact, the Jalsa Salana invites huge numbers of people from outside of the community, both parliamentarians, representatives of major religions, and normal folk from just the general public. So every individual has the opportunity to invite however many guests he wants to, or she wants for that matter, to the convention. So they come, they fill out a simple form saying, yes, my name is this, I'm from here, and they come to the convention. And huge numbers actually come every single year, just not only to this event, but in fact to all the other events that we have around the year as well.
Abdul, or Quddus, which one should I call you?
Either one's good.
Right, okay, brilliant. Can I ask you, do you worry that your voice, the Ahmadiyya Muslim voice, is being drowned out here in the UK? Because, of course, it's about lobbying. It's about getting your voice heard. And, I mean, this is something that I have many conversations with the Sikh community about, who currently have not a single MP, for instance, in the House of Commons. What about representation and to make sure you're at the table when conversations are being had?
And, Nihal, I think the media has started to play its role fairly now. I mean, before we found that, where peaceful Islam, or the real Islam, I should call it, was being promoted and talked about, there was not many media outlets which will cover it. But today, we have a platform, right, you're giving us a platform here right now as well, to promote our teachings, to promote what our beliefs is. So that conversation, that dialogue has started. There's a long way to go, but I think media attention is coming towards our community especially, because we are teaching the right peaceful message of Islam itself, and we're teaching love for all, hatred for none. So the conversation has started.
But of course, presumably there are people working against you to say that your opinions are not mainstream, that your opinions would it be in danger of inflaming passions in the Muslim community. How do you counter that, Mansoor?
I mean, the fact of the matter is that people can say all they want, but when our religious leader right now, and they do, yes, but the fact of the matter is that our religious leader right now, Mirza Masroor Ahmad, who is the 5th Caliph, who is the worldwide head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Association, he goes about in the entire world addressing, he's been to the European Parliament, he's been to Capitol Hill, he's been to the Houses of Parliament, to talk about the teachings of Islam, and also talk about the propagation of peace in the world. Now, these are things which no Muslim can say, oh, we're not, because, I mean, we all forget that Islam is the literal Arabic word for peace. A Muslim is literally a person who spreads peace. A Muslim terrorist is an oxymoron. It doesn't make any sense. It's a peaceful terrorist. So we talk about these aspects, and we talk about them on a day-to-day basis. We hold blood drives, we hold charity walks.
But the problem is those terrorists believe that they derive their justification from the Holy Book. They believe and they find the verses that will justify, of course, as people argue continually, they take them out of context. Also, as well, of course, I was seeing the very, very interesting comedy routine, weirdly enough, don't worry, this is going somewhere, with Shazia Mirza. And she did a whole thing about this, and she actually picked out a hadith where the Prophet Muhammad predicted that ISIS an organisation like ISIS would come.
Yeah,
with great specificity.
Yes, actually, it's actually. I mean, I've never seen this before, but I saw it at the end. Weirdly enough, considering the job I do, I had to find it out from a comedy route. But also, as well, what was interesting, she interviewed Christiane Amanpour, I think it was, from CNN, interviewed someone who had been a journalist who had either been kidnapped by or he had spent some time with ISIS. And one thing that he said was that he hardly saw any Quran.
Exactly, yes.
He hardly saw them talk about religion. They didn't try and convert him. It was as if they didn't. I think it was a French journalist.
Yes.
You know, it was Machiavelli who said that leaders, they take their people to war on the basis of that which is dearest to them at the end of the day. When we went to war in Iraq, and when the US went to the war in Iraq, it was about going to war in the name of liberty, in the name of freedom, in the name of deposing a dictator. The leaders appeal to the highest and the most grandest authority which has the sway over the hearts and minds of those they're appealing to. Now, for people in religious countries, or people of a religious bent, that becomes religion. It has no bearing on whether actually religion actually advocates that, in the same way as going to Iraq and 100,000 Iraqis dying. That's not in the name of freedom.
Some. Yeah.
And then some.
Yeah.
That's also not in the name of that doesn't fall in line with the principles of freedom, liberty and justice.
No, it doesn't. But of course, we are seeing, unfortunately, around the world at the moment, the Muslim community being dragged through the dirt by the actions of extremists in Africa, in the Middle East, even in Europe when they get the chance. And they find their justification. It doesn't help that they scream Allah Akbar at the top of their voice as they detonate their suicide vests. And the battle that you have, the jihad that you have, is against this hatred.
Very well said, yes. I mean, that's the whole concept. I mean, but the problem is, throughout time we've seen there's always one terrorist organisation at some place in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, the IRA, it was predominantly, well, it's a Christian organisation,
Catholic,
but they have absolutely no links in that sense to what we understand to be Christianity.
But the difference being is, of course, Mansoor, is that they didn't use religious texts to back up what they were doing. They had political goals. It was territorial. Now, of course, we would argue equally that this is exactly the same. This is about territory, and it's about power, and it's about men with guns showing off how big their guns are. But they do use, and you know, when you have Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi stand up there in Mosul, I think it was, where he made his speech, and he's dressed there like an Ayatollah. The world looks at that and says, well, this is a man of faith. His faith is evil. The faith, sorry, not his faith, but the faith that he sees in his own head is evil. But it's faith.
Yeah, but Nihal, we have to see that the Quran is the actual word of God, and the Prophet of Islam was actually the person who was practicing that word of God. We should see his example. His example is exactly what the Quran says. And did he do what these so-called ISIS so-called Muslims are doing? Of course not. His practice was completely different.
Did your Messiah claim to be as important as the Prophet Muhammad?
No, not at all. In fact, on one occasion he said that absolutely everything that I am or I have is the result of the blessings of Muhammad, peace and blessings of God be upon him.
So he himself expressed no parity at all?
No.
His whole prophethood is subservient to the prophethood of the Holy Prophet of Islam. He says throughout his literature that whatever I have gained spiritually, it's because I followed the Prophet of Islam, the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him.
Which is actually why, there's actually why when you originally, the question a couple of minutes ago when you said, could you tell us about your Prophet, I was actually going to cut in and say, well, actually, if you would say your Prophet, I would talk about Muhammad, peace and blessings of God be upon him.
Right.
As opposed to the promised Messiah, who himself has called himself the complete servant of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of God be upon him.
It is 42 minutes past 11. I'm joined by three members of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, and the reason that I'm speaking to them is because this weekend one of Britain's biggest and oldest Islamic conventions will be taking place. It's called the Jalsa Salana, and more than 30,000 Ahmadiyyas from around the world will be attending. Now, it is inevitable when we have a conversation about the Ahmadiyya Muslim community that there will be those who do not regard you as Muslims. You're used to this.
Yep.
Can I just ask you, because you all have a personal story about the persecution that you and your family have faced. Abdul, what's been yours?
So my grandfather has also narrated this to me and my parents, that from my mother's side, he used to own a medicine clinic or like a pharmacy. So during the 1974 riots, just before this whole this persecution was at its peak in one way or another. So it was burnt down in Faisalabad in Pakistan. And when my paternal grandfather accepted Ahmadiyyat, he was pretty much disowned by his family. He was forced to live outside, but he maintained that relationship with his parents, with his family. But there was nothing from the other side. So it was something that both sides had to put up with, but they didn't want to give up their families either. But they, of course, made sure that their faith was pretty much prioritized over all worldly things, all worldly relations.
Mansoor?
So, my background is split because I have my father's British, converted from Catholicism, and my mother is Pakistani. So I've got two aspects of this, almost this persecution thing. So back when Pakistan, my family house, in the same riots as Quddus was talking about, my family house was actually set on fire. Because, you have the large mehels, not the mehels, but like the very, very large houses there. And they came in through the front gate, and there was just lines and lines of these people who surrounded the house and set it on fire. So there's men, women, children.
Oh my God.
So these guys were fleeing from inside whilst people were setting fire to the house on the outside and surrounding it. But on the other side, then, as an English or British person, from my father's side, I talk about the persecution to an extent that we find here. A couple of years ago, we decided to set up a small stall talking about our own views in Tooting, of all places. And fair enough, going to the lion's den, as it were, but we went there with a peaceful message to talk about peace and community, and we were literally driven off the streets. Saying, you dare come back here tomorrow, you dare come back here next week. We were there completely with permission, not doing anything to harm anybody else, but we were literally driven off the streets. So, it's not something that's only confined to the subcontinent. I'm sure you will know the stories of Indonesia, of Lahore is actually part of the subcontinent, but many other places around the world where the Indonesian one I was talking about is where people's heads were bashed in with rocks because of the fact that they were Ahmadis. So, the persecution stories never end. They started from almost day one, and they're continuing on to today. Even yesterday in Bengal, 10 Ahmadis were injured after their house was attacked. A year ago, a house was set on fire where grandchildren and the grandmother were killed burnt alive in their own house, suffocated.
It's profoundly difficult to understand why people would. I can understand people would disapprove, but to go to the stage where they're willing to kill. Tahir, do you have a similar?
Well, my grandfather was on my paternal side. He accepted Ahmadiyyat when he was very young, when he was 16 years old, or thereabouts.
And he was originally.
He's Indian. He's from Delhi.
Right.
Brought up in Delhi, but from a place called Meerut.
And he was a Sunni Muslim?
He was a Sunni Muslim, yes. And he attended actually the Jalsa Salana in India at the time, where the second caliph was a speaker, and he noticed that all of a sudden while he was speaking, there was a huge shower of stones that came onto the where he was sitting, and all these men who were sitting there were being pelted by stones being thrown by Sunni Muslims who had entered into the Jalsa area and had started stoning the audience. And the caliph of the time, he said, "Sit still, do not move a muscle." And nobody got up or moved their place. And my father said that he had never seen such obedience in all of his life. And then the men moved, these attackers, they moved to the women's side, to the women's ward area, and they started throwing stones on them. And then the caliph said, "Will you let your women be attacked like this?" Because the police were standing by doing nothing. So then they got up and they drove them away and then returned to their seats. And in a way, that was an example of how self-defense should be applied. You wait first for the law enforcement, and in that condition, there were people being actively harmed and hurt. And he said he had never seen such examples of obedience and law-abiding behavior as well, because they were totally they behaved only to the extent that they could defend themselves and not beyond that.
Let's speak to Rab in Birmingham, who's called in. Rab, good morning.
Hello there, good morning, Nihal.
What would you like to ask the three gentlemen I have sitting with me?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I don't believe that anybody has the right to harm anybody regardless of their faith. So whoever the people that are doing that are doing it of their own account, because the faith doesn't teach them to do that, and it's completely against that kind of thing. So that shouldn't happen. Second thing I'd like to basically more or less ask rather than say is that I've been listening to what they've been saying, and it seems a little bit contradictory what they've been saying, because I don't know much about the Ahmadiyya faith, and it's quite interesting to be able to listen to somebody who is Ahmadiyya to see what their take is on it.
And that's why we did this, yeah.
Yeah, and it seems a little bit contradictory what they were saying, that they believe that the last and final messenger was Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, but yet they seem to follow a different chap. So I'd like to ask them, first of all, to explain that, and also if they feel that they do follow the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him's teachings, then why do they feel they have to actually give themselves a different label and actually label themselves as different?
I think Abdul, Quddus, Arif, would you like to deal with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is Rab, me, Abdul.
Hi, Rab. Thank you for your call. Yeah, it's a very important question. Most importantly, Rab, it's important to know that we believe that the Holy Prophet of Islam, Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah, is the last Prophet. We believe in him 100%. He's the Prophet that we follow. But we also follow every single word that he said as well. He is the one that prophesied another Prophet to come, a promised Messiah to come.
Where is that written?
So we can find various ahadith in the Quran. It also mentions in Surah Jummah, which is one of the chapters of the Quran, it says that there's going to be a prophet like the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وَآخَرِينَ مِنْهُمْ لَمَّا يَلْحَقُوا بِهِمْ, it says.
Okay.
That in the latter days, there's going to be a group of people just like the Sahaba, just like the companions of the Prophet of Islam in the latter days.
Yeah.
And when this verse was being revealed to the Prophet of Islam, his companions also asked, Rab, that how would we distinguish those people? And the Holy Prophet of Islam, he had one of his companions who was Salman Farsi, of Persian descent. He was sitting next to him. He put his hand on his shoulder and he said that from these people, these people will be from. And at the time, the Holy Prophet ﷺ mentioned another sign. He said, لَوْ كَانَ الْإِيمَانُ مُعَلَّقًا بِثُرَيَّ لَنَالُهُ رَجُلٌ مِّنْ هَؤُلَاءِ. That when the faith would have ascended to the Pleiades, to the most furthest place away from the earth, so basically the teachings of Islam will be completely distorted, then from this individual there will be a group of people that will bring the faith back to this world. And then the Prophet of Islam said that there's another way of recognizing how these people will be known as the truthful. He said that they will be like my companions. And the condition that the Holy Prophet's companions had to undergo was such that they were persecuted. They were not allowed to call the prayer. They were not allowed to pray within the Kaaba. And this is the same scenario that we are faced today. Especially in Pakistan, but we're not limiting ourselves to Pakistan. Across the world, where there's other Muslims, they enforce this sort of rule upon us, that we cannot call people to prayer. We cannot go perform the pilgrimage. We cannot perform the basic tenets of our faith, which is the faith of Islam. So this was an actual criterion that was set by the Prophet of Islam himself to recognize the people of the latter days. And we claim that those people of the latter days is our community, the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community. And the reason we give ourselves the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community is such that Ahmad is another name of the Holy Prophet of Islam. Ahmad represents the compassionate side of the Prophet of Islam. Hence we are known as the Ahmadiyya Muslim. That the first, Muhammad, represents the side where it was all about majestic, about the message of Islam at its most majesty being fulfilled. And Ahmad represents that message being propagated in a very subtle, in a very loving, in a very peaceful manner. So these are two attributes of Prophet of Islam.
Okay,
and that's what we call ourselves, the Ahmadiyya Muslim.
Rab, that's a fairly comprehensive explanation.
Yeah, I mean, I'll have to obviously look into what he said, because, like I said, I don't know much about the faith myself, and I'm actually in an actual learning club myself.
Aren't we all, mate? Aren't we all?
But the thing is, still, I still have an issue with the fact that when if somebody had read the Quran according to what this gentleman just said, that it says in there that there will be another prophet coming.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody could have jumped on the bandwagon at that time and said, "Oh yeah, that's actually me that they were talking about. I'm the last and final prophet." So how do they know that this person, if he's not mentioned by name or anywhere in the Quran, that this person that they choose to follow is that person?
Well, Rab, I think this question is so pertinent, and you know what? The Holy Prophet of Islam...
Very good question, yeah.
Yeah, the Holy Prophet of Islam actually made it very easy for us to also, understand how we can recognize which person it will be, because like you said, any Tom, Dick and Harry could claim to be a prophet. The Prophet of Islam said in one of his hadiths, and it's mentioned in Dar al-Qutni, a book of hadith, it mentions that the sun and the moon will eclipse on the given dates. So the sun will eclipse in the middle of the date, and the moon will eclipse on the last of its date, and the first of its date. Sorry, and not just this. This will happen in the month of Ramadan. So we find that in 1894, when the promised Messiah, alayhi salam, the promised Messiah on whom be peace, made his claim, those very individuals who were opposing him said to him that you've made this claim, but the Prophet of Islam has said this very facts, that there should be a lunar and solar eclipse on these very given dates in Ramadan. So where is that eclipse? And when this eclipse took place, and history, you can go back in history and see these things, in the Western and Eastern Hemisphere, those very individuals said, oh no, what are we going to do now? The entire world, Muslim Ummah, will follow this man because these signs have been fulfilled. So again, these very criterions have been set by the Prophet himself, and they have come true in support of the promised Messiah, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him.
Okay, Rab?
Yeah, well, once again, like I said, if you could just, the way you just eloquently put it, and you could read it, so what stopped that gentleman reading it?
Sorry.
That said to say that this is what's written, so this must be me. I am.
Okay, Mansoor wants to come back in on that.
I think the very point that you're saying that it was available for anybody to read actually proves the truth of the matter, because if anyone could have read it, then anyone could have actually claimed it at that point.
If it is there, because obviously I haven't checked it.
Oh right, yes. So by all means, if you go onto our website. Am I allowed to say the website?
Yeah, of course you can.
So it's www.alislam, that's ALISLAM.org. You will find all of the things that we're saying in written form. So it's not just something which we're quoting now, which will...
And then, of course, for Rab's perspective, because Rab likes to search out these things, Rab, he will need to go to an independent source to look at that, not your website, but one which...
So you can find the reference on our website and then go on to the source yourself.
We're going to have to move on, but Rab, thank you very much. Kumar is in the West Midlands. Good morning, Kumar.
Good morning, Nihal and all your lovely guests.
What would you like to say?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, I'd say, I have some friends who are from the Ahmadiyya community, and it's always a pleasure to meet them. I'm Hindu background with family originally from India, and I feel a real sense of calm. And when you talk to these people, it's actually quite there's a love and a peace which just emanates, and and I think that particularly is a fact with their previous leader and this one. I do watch their channel just to keep up to date and just to obviously learn and experience things.
That's interesting. So as a non-Ahmadi, as a non-Muslim, you watch their channel?
Yes, and interesting enough, I was reading a book written by the original their leader, and after I read it, I thought it was actually set in this present age, because it actually was talking about when the British were ruling India, and some of the issues were actually present-day issues, and I was quite alarmed. I thought, hang on, when was this book written? It was like, I think, turn of the century. I was quite shocked by that.
It's possibly the book called The British Government and Jihad, in which
that's right, yeah, I think that possibly was it. And I think the other thing is, I think, obviously the connection I have is I'm from India, and I feel absolutely so proud that obviously we have sainthood in India and obviously Gurujis and whatever, so it's nothing new to me. And I obviously pay as much respect to their current leaders as I would to my Guruji. because this is the oneness that we're trying to present, of whatever faith we are. And I think, I think in a way we often hear of, hatred and whatever. And I think it's very important, particularly this community and also the Sufi community, that, and in particular the Shia community, which have all strong connections with India, that they are given a platform. And really, Neil, thank you for giving this opportunity. And it's been so lovely to hear them. And the love and peace that Emily, just listen to these gentlemen, is so wonderful.
Okay, Kamal, thank you very much indeed. This text that came on, my name is Inamullah and I am one who has been persecuted in Pakistan. We had been attacked by a mob, looted by all other sect groups. They burnt our property, they demolished my home and my father's surgery. In the end result, me and my father and my younger brother have been put in the prison and face blasphemy charges just because we are Ahmadi. Naseem is on the line from London. Naseem, good morning.
Good morning, sir. I'm from Sweden. And just one thing I want to say that...
hur läget?
Det är jättebra.
Jättebra.
Det är i London också.
Go on, Naseem. That's the only Swedish I know. The other one is I'm sorry, I'm drunk, which would not be relevant in this particular conversation. Right, Naseem, carry on.
Yes, please. I want to tell you that you talked about about the marriages within the Muslim communities, I want to just tell you that Ahmadis were declared non-Muslim in 1974 by the parliament, and then it was
in Pakistan, yes,
by Ordinance 20 in 1984 by Ziaul Haq, that Ahmadis cannot call themselves Muslims. How they can marry in the other Muslim communities? We were barred from all Muslim communities. Then the other thing is that Ahmadis cannot cast their vote. Now I'm a politician in Sweden. In Pakistan, even I can't cast my vote as a citizen of Pakistan. Then the third thing I want to tell you, that in Pakistan, for the 6th class, the Islamiyat books, that the children for the age of 12 or 13, when they read, it's quoted, it's the Islamiyat for class 6 by the spectrum prepared by the governor of the Federal Ministry of Education, Pakistan, Islamiyat. Please quote.
Naseem, we've run out of time. Urshekta. I'm joined by 3 members of the Ahmadiyya community, and the reason that they are here is because they are having a big get-together, a convention, the Jalsa Salana, this coming weekend in England. 30,000 people, more than, are expected to attend. So I'm now joined by the Imam Mansoor Clarke, who is documenting the history of the Ahmadiyya community here in the UK, the Imam Abdul Quddus Arif, and the Dr. Tahir Nasser, who all focus on youth issues. But Malik has called in from Leicester. Good afternoon, Malik.
Good afternoon, Nihal, and good afternoon to all the participants here.
Good afternoon. What would you like to say, my friend?
Yeah, sorry, I actually joined the late in program, and I was hearing some chap talking about the marriages between interfaith, between Ahmadis and Muslims.
Yes.
One thing I would like to point out here...
Ahmadis are Muslims, aren't they?
Not according to me and not according to my beliefs.
Right, okay.
And I again, no offense to anyone there.
No, none taken.
Okay.
They're used to it, believe me.
Well, yeah, we're used to it now as well.
So what, can I ask you why you don't accept them as being Muslims, even though what they practice, the vast majority of it is exactly what you practice. And they've also clarified that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is the last prophet of Islam. So they've accepted that. So which one of the 5 pillars of Islam do you think they don't?
Right. Nihal, without going into much detail, and I'm not claiming to be a scholar of the religion, of the faith, whatever little bit I've learned, I have quote you a couple of examples. Number one, Musaylama Abdul Kazzab, who declared himself as a prophet, and later on, obviously, he was declared non-Muslim. And the second one was Baha'i, right? During the time when Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Qadian declared himself as a promised Messiah, there was another person from Iran, from Persia, Baha'i, and now they started calling themselves Baha'i Muslim. Now they are Baha'i. Each and everyone, if you compare the history and the notes and everything, they all claim the same things. They all came up with the same sort of revelations of their own and the ideas and everything, which were rejected comprehensively by the Muslim scholars on a vast scale. Now, one misconception that people have that Ahmadiyya were declared non-Muslims only by Pakistani Parliament. Well, it started from Pakistani Parliament, but the history goes way before.
Sorry, I'm just to clarify something, Malik. I mean, you talk about Muslim scholars who comprehensively rejected the opinions, but of course there are Muslim scholars who are willing to completely back what ISIS are doing. There are Muslim scholars who would completely reject what ISIS are doing. So in terms of Islam, and there are Shia Muslim scholars, there are Sunni Muslim scholars, so it's not as if there is even a united voice in Islam itself when it comes to scholarly conversations, is there?
Agreed to that. When it comes to Shia, when it comes to Sunni, Barelvi, Deoband, none of them actually declared that they have got a new promised Messiah. Right. So that's, they all agreed. No, if you allow me to finish.
Yeah, Dr. Tahir wants to come in, but yes, please finish your point.
When it comes to ISIS, that's a whole different debate, which I don't want to go into it, and you don't have the time for it. And I don't agree with what ISIS is doing, so we leave it to that. Only Allah will tell what's right and what's wrong, right? When it comes to the promised Messiah, and in 1974, you had a debate, and the Mirza Nasser, I believe, was the caliph at that point of time, declared caliph, who actually said before the parliament, and mind you, parliament was not comprised of only Muslim scholars. They were electorally elected people who represented north and south of Pakistan, from north to south. And Yahya Bakhtiar was the Attorney General, and I would urge you to read about him.
Right, I'm going to just urge you just to take a pause for a minute, Malik, because Tahir wants to come in on a number of points that you've made. So, Malik, stay with us.
Yeah, so thank you for calling, first of all. And there are several misconceptions that I think just really need to be busted.
Okay.
First of all, in terms of the last prophethood issue, nowhere the Ahmadiyya Muslim community believes he is the last law-bearing prophet. Now, prophets can be of two types. They either bring a new teaching, or they reinvigorate or bring people back to the same teaching. Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph were all within the same family. They were all prophets of God. They were all following the same religion, right? Abraham was the law-bearing prophet. His sons and his grandsons were those who would rejuvenate and teach people the message which Abraham brought. Now, we believe Mirza Ghulam Ahmad was a non-law-bearing prophet. This kind of prophethood, we believe, is permitted and accepted in Islam. Right. That's to be clarified. There's one other point, please. I just wanted to clarify. It isn't this issue of read about Yahya Bakhti, read about 1974. I mean, come on. It's very simple. The Quran states in this very first chapter, Allah is Malik Yawmiddin, master of the day of judgment. Judgment is left to God. When the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, wanted to know who was a Muslim in Medina, and he did a census, it is in Sahih Bukhari, the most authoritative Islamic text after the Quran. He said, write down for me the name of everyone who calls himself a Muslim. He didn't say go through all of their different beliefs on all different complex theological concepts of prophethood. Even if you were to accept that we do not believe that the Prophet Muhammad is that we believe a prophet, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad is a false prophet, so on and so forth. The criteria for calling yourself a Muslim, right, is that you say the kalima shahada, there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger, and that you practice Islam in the most generic sense. The Prophet Muhammad said, he who prays facing Mecca, and he who eats our food, and he who does the kalima, that credo I just mentioned, they are a Muslim and they are under my protection. Right? That's also in Sahih Bukhari. So this whole issue of, we call this, we have this scholarly debate, it's irrelevant.
Okay. Nihal, do you want me to address this?
I would, yes.
Okay. Now, with all due respect to my brothers here, Mirza Bashiruddin Mahmud is not my caliph. It was your second caliph who declared us as kafir.
Sorry, Malik. Sorry, Malik. I just want to bring you back to the point. That Tahir made, which was about actually the earliest sayings of the Quran, not about 1974, not about anything like that.
I'm not talking about 1974 now. I'm actually specifically addressing Tahir's point.
Okay, may I reply?
So just to be clear to our non-Muslim listeners, Malik, you are suggesting that someone from the Ahmadiyya community, a caliph, declared people. Wait a minute. I just want to get clarification here. You are saying that there was a caliph who declared he was an Ahmadi and he declared non-Ahmadis as being kafir. Is that what you're saying?
Being kafir and declared the fatwa, Ahmadi fatwa, that Ahmadis are not allowed to marry non-Ahmadis. Not allowed to give their daughters to non-Ahmadis. They can take the daughters of so-called Muslims, but they're not allowed. Okay,
let's get some clarification. No, I understand.
Bashiruddin Mahmood.
No, Malik, we understand that, and that is a very important point that we need to put to our three Ahmadiyya friends.
What exactly the point? Well, he's made several. So which one?
So the point about a previous Ahmadi caliph declaring non-Ahmadis as being kafir.
That's absolutely incorrect. The term kafir...
Malik, the whole point of having a debate is, my friend, if we ask a question, we wait for someone to answer it.
My apologies.
No, it's all right.
He very clearly clarified the issue of the concept of being a kafir. A kafir means a rejecter. Right? He said that they are rejectors of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, and thereby God may adjudge them in his eyes as not being of those who submit to God, which is the meaning of the term Muslim. But he made it very clear. He wrote 200 books or so. Every single place he refers to non-Ahmadi Muslims, he calls them non-Ahmadi Muslims. He said they have the right to call themselves a Muslim. This is not about who God will adjudge to be a Muslim. This is not what this debate is about. This is about the right of every human being to label themselves as and to denominate themselves to the religion of their choosing. I accept that Malik may not be a Muslim in the eyes of God. In the eyes of God. Right. But he has every right to call himself a Muslim, and I have no right to take that right from him.
Which is not
he,
Malik.
On the other hand, has a different position with regard to me. Right. He says I can, he says that I'm not allowed to attribute to myself the religion of my choosing.
Okay, Malik, and that is a very important distinction, because I guess the common vernacular way of saying it would be who died and left you the right to judge someone who is and who isn't a Muslim. And I guess that is an important question. Who gave you the right to judge?
Ghulam Ahmad Qadian himself referenced Braheen Ahmadiyya. Please read the...
Malik, can I just ask you this question? I think it's an important question, because what Tahir has said is that it was said that you do not have a right to call yourself an Ahmadiyya Muslim, but you do have the right absolutely to call yourself a Muslim. Now that is a very different position than the one you're taking, which is that these three gentlemen surrounding me now do not have the right to call themselves Muslim. My question then to you as a presenter on the BBC Asia Network is, who gave you that right?
Well, again,
who gave you the right to judge someone who calls himself a Muslim?
If you allow me to elaborate.
Sorry, go on.
Again, the reference I'm quoting here, Mirza Bashiruddin Mahmud, son of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Qadian, second caliph of...
But you're not answering my question.
No, I am answering that question. Nihal, allow me, just 10 seconds, allow me to that. When he says, now this is the interpretation that Tahir is giving you. That person actually openly declared non-Ahmadis as kafir, non-Muslims.
No, he did not.
Openly. In Braheen Ahmadiyya, Sirat-e-Ahmadi.
The second Khalifa didn't write Braheen Ahmadiyya. Braheen Ahmadiyya was written, and the last book was published in 1908.
I absolutely understand that, but then you have to receive Sirat-e-Ahmadi, which was written by Mirza Bashir.
Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to square this circle, but I guess it is... It is a shame that people will say who is and who are not Muslims if someone wishes to call themselves one. No, it's certainly not my place to say whether someone's a Buddhist or not if they regard themselves to be one.
I think what Tahir said at the beginning is the most pertinent point here, that we have to see the example of the Prophet of Islam. If he is saying that the person who just declares themselves as a Muslim by way of tongue, not through actions or anything, just by saying that I am a Muslim, he will be written down as a Muslim. And it's only God who can judge. Because that's our belief.
In other words, we have very specific beliefs in other, I'm not going to mention any names, in other denominations of Islam who have such radical beliefs which change the very fundamentals of Islam, such as sending curses upon the companions of the Prophet or the wives of the Prophet, and yet they are said to be completely Muslim. And yet the Ahmadis, who completely and utterly only follow the true principles of Islam as taught by the Quran and the practice of the Prophet are called non-Muslims. I mean, for example, I spoke to you a little bit beforehand. The fact that you can view what we actually believe. I've said the website before of alislam.org. We also have our Sky channel on 787, which is Muslim Television Ahmadiyya. And you can view that channel and say, and whatever you will see on that will be completely in accordance with Islam. We're even starting our own 24/7 radio station by the community called The Voice of Islam. We are Muslims and we are not afraid to tell anyone else that we are.
Okay, well, if you need a break from my constant arguing with people, then listen to that. I'm sure. Ahmadiyyas are not Muslim, says Hamraz, and will never be accepted in Islam. Mirza Ahmed Qadiani was a fake prophet. He claimed to be God, the Son of God, Jesus, and Mary at the same time.
Well, you know, you can just make up whatever you want, really.
I mean, I'm sure
so none of that's true.
I'm sure
he didn't claim to be all of that.
I'm sure this gentleman didn't read the works of the promised Messiah himself. He didn't claim to be God. I mean, the caller before said that Baha'u'llah claimed to be a prophet. No, he actually claimed to be God himself.
Yeah.
So, you know, these facts are completely contrary.
All right. Well, look, very lastly, let's speak about the Jalsa Salana as well this weekend, because 30,000 people are going to be coming in. It's a huge logistical exercise. Tell me about the kind of numbers involved in this.
Well, as you say, 30,000 people, 5,000 volunteers, 3,000 men, 2,000 women, over a 208-acre farm. Volunteers.
About 1 million rotis.
It's a huge plant. And they're all coming to listen to the Caliph, the spiritual leader. And this is something today we hear about the caliphate of ISIS and so on and so forth. We've had a caliphate for, 105 years now? Totally peaceful, totally propagating the true teachings of Islam. And they're all coming to hear him speak.
Bhupinder said Islam was started to find peace when there was none. It seems that Islam has not found peace yet. Peace is only found when people are allowed to believe their own faith in their own way. Sadly, Muhammad never found a day of peace in his lifetime. When Muhammad received the Quran from his God, why did Muhammad still not find peace? Will Muslims find peace even when Muhammad could not?
I think a very important point, just to quickly put in here, is that on the day of the conquest of Mecca, which is something which is very common to all Muslims, which is when the Prophet Muhammad marched on Mecca with 10,000 men. And when he marched, and these are the people that had atrociously done persecution against Muhammad and his followers, ripping a woman from the middle by attaching a camel to one to her arms and one to her legs and making them run in opposite directions. This kind of persecution, which, by the way, is mirrored almost today with the Ahmadiyya community. But when Muhammad actually marched on Mecca with 10,000 men, he forgave. And he said the very, very prominent words of La tathriba alaykum al-yawm, that today there will be no blame upon you. So if a man has that much contentment to forgive the people who destroyed and
killed his daughter,
who tortured his companions, and had the contentment to forgive, that's a pretty peaceful man for me.
Okay, well, I think that's a good place to end our conversation today. If people want to find out more about the Ahmadiyya community, and are there perhaps, I can't imagine there's any Ahmadis who don't know about what's going on this weekend. They would be pretty poor Ahmadis, I can imagine, if they weren't aware of 30,000 of them descending on Hampshire. But just where can people find out more information about the community? Of course, Muslim and non-Muslim who want to read up more about it, as we heard from Kumar, who watches your TV channel, no less.
So simply, you can find us on many different websites, the most prominent of which is www.alislam, which is alislam.org. That's our community's main website. You can also search for Love for All, Hatred for None, which is a very prominent slogan of ours, which is bus campaigns and everything all over the UK. We have the Sky channel, which is Muslim Television Ahmadiyya. It's on Sky 787. And there's many others. The Voice of Islam, the radio station is about to be set up. And you can contact, we have the biggest mosque in Western Europe, which is at the end of the Northern Line, no less, in Morden.
You're just boasting now.
and the oldest one in London.
And the oldest mosque.
Okay, but if they want to know particularly about the Jalsa Salana, they can go on to jalsasalana.org and they'll find all the information on that. So.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Gentlemen, thank you for coming in today.
Thank you very much for having us.
And talking in depth about what the Ahmadiyya community are about, what they do, and of course facing head-on the criticisms that you face from calls and texts as well. Thank you very much. 26 minutes past 12.